We are here today to celebrate many, many things. And the most important thing is to celebrate learning and education. And really just bring people who aspire to achieve greatness, but they don't really have that reach and that bridge. What people are doing here is to give them those bridges, to give them those opportunities. And the man behind this particular initiative is no other than Goulam Amarsy, the president of HBS Clubs. Goulam, over to you, sir.
Good evening. I would like to thank you for coming here tonight. I would like to start the evening by welcoming our stars, the 71 students who are participating in the second edition of this program is about giving back. And I would like to welcome all the supporters of this program. And I would like to start by the sponsors who have given us tremendous support. They're all Ali bin Musa. I met Ali bin Musa at a class given by Professor Khanna last February, and Tarun Khanna presented our program. And on the way out, he approaches me. I don't know him, he doesn't know me. He says, Goulam, what's your budget? And I say, X. And he says, I'll give you 20%. You can count on me. Right there. He didn't know me. He had never attended this program. But that's a kind of support we're getting from the community. And I thank all the sponsors. I'd like to thank my board. They have been extremely supportive of what we do. I've been the president of this club for the last 10 years. They still are okay with me. We're good. Our club is one of the most active alumni clubs in the region. We are, by far, I'm told, very active, very proactive. We come up with initiatives that people like and enjoy. And we're growing. We have over 1,000 members, people on our database. A third of this list is an active list of members. We are very lucky in that way, where the alumni are very interested in what we do. And I believe it's because of content and because of our mission. One entity that I would like to thank, and that's the DIFC. They have been our partner from day one. We thank you for your support. The 4 professors who make this thing happen. So Professor Tarun Khanna, Professor Karim Lakhani, Assistant Professor Christine Fabi, and Professor Kari Elkins, we would like to thank you for everything you do, for all the volunteer work that you provide, and for being here with a very tight schedule. We thank you for that. And I would like to specially introduce my friend, my younger brother, Professor Tarun Khanna, who has been a professor at Harvard for over 20 years. He's specialized in emerging markets, and has written several books. You inspire us, and we are really thankful. And on that note, I would like to present you a memento of our appreciation.
I'm very privileged to invite our next guest, who's come all the way from Saudi Arabia. This is Zaher Al Munajjed. He is the chairman of the HBS Clubs since its inception also. He also has a long mandate. It's amazing how he has helped to give us that leadership and that vision over the last 10 years. And he's going to take it forward for us. Mr. Zaher, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ladies and gentlemen, the launching today of the 2018 edition of the Harvard Crossroads Emerging Leaders Program is a happy and auspicious occasion very close to our hearts. This initiative, which joins the professors and the alumni of HBS, embodies the best of the school's teaching and underscores our keenness to share our success with the young emerging leaders present here today. They have flown in from many diverse societies that meet in the Dubai Crossroads. As Goulam eloquently mentioned in his presentation, we are at a crossroads. It is, first of all, a geographical crossroads, but most of us also see in it a crossroads of culture, of trade, of development, of communication, of opportunity, of dynamism, and of wealth. But how many among us ever dared to describe this crossroad as this crossroads of poverty, unemployment, and illiteracy? I see round eyes and gasps, but yes, we are sitting here in Dubai in the comfort of this wonderful city at the crossroads of Asia, MENA, and Africa. It is undeniable that we in the GCC have been blessed with relative political and economic stability. And most importantly, leaders that have the means, the skills, the benevolence, and the vision to provide well for their societies. But the comfort and high standards of living we enjoy are not shared by most societies in our surroundings. Wars, strife, instability, mismanagement, and lack of opportunities altogether have created around us a sad and uneasy neighborhood. Unemployment is staggering in MENA, which has the largest youth population in the world and the highest youth unemployment rate with an average close to 30%. We have today around 30 million unemployed young men and women in this area, and this is only youth unemployment and not total unemployment. All these statistics are just intended not to scare, just to underline the magnitude of the challenge and problems we face at our crossroads. Today, this responsibility, or the responsibility we have towards participating in alleviating the burdens of our less privileged countrymen and our less fortunate neighbors, is staring us in the face. At this point, let me shift to something more positive. Let me talk about sharing. For some, sharing is a religious duty. For others, a social responsibility. For others, a cultural tradition. For some others, a human calling. And finally, the rest would say it's just a sheer pleasure to share. We, as corporations, associations, or individuals, we as responsible members of our society, we as successful professionals, proud of our humanity, we all believe that we have a duty to participate and share the fruits of our success with others. Each will give in his own way and within his own means and abilities. Opportunity, education, and networks are the three essential tools required for social and economic success in this world. We are proud to share our success and stretch our hands to our young emerging leaders. And we hope that you will all join us in doing this too. The needs are great, and what we are doing is just a drop in the bucket. The Chinese proverb says, if you always give, you will always have. Mahatma Gandhi said, to find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others. And Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, said, if a person passes away leaving knowledge that benefits others, his good deeds will continue flowing eternally. Thank you.
Special appreciation to DIFC. We'd like to welcome Alya Al Zarouni to join us. She's the Senior Vice President Operations at the DIFC Authority. Alya, over to you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and most importantly, students, our future leaders, good evening and welcome to DIFC. This year, the Crossroads Emerging Leaders Program is a very special program, not only because the program have actually attracted or has increased the number of students by more than 40%, but also because it coincides with the year of Zayed, which is a very special year for the UAE. It's a year we chose to celebrate the legacy of our founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, who once said, "The greatest use of wealth that can be made is to invest it in creating generations of educated and trained people." A very true statement by a true believer in education, whose legacy and vision still lives till date. So for those of you who don't know what DIFC is, well, it's way beyond this beautiful infrastructure. It's the leading financial hub of the Miyasa region. It's one of the world's top financial centers. And it's also home to more than 2,000 active entities today and more than 23,000 professionals. For DIFC, education and human capital development has been always a key focus area, and that is to develop the much needed talent within this region, which is lacking today. We've engaged in so many initiatives, including the relaunch of our own academy in 2017, and I have to say that our 2-year collaboration with the HBS Alumni Club has been one of the most impactful and fruitful initiatives till date. Thank you so much to Goulam and Afsana for going above and beyond to put this amazing program together. Thank you to all the Harvard professors that are with us today for coming all the way from the US to be part of this program. And most importantly, thank you to all the students that are here today for your eagerness, willingness to learn, and bringing positive change to your own world. Wish you all the best, and I hope that this program will be your stepping stone to success. Thank you.
All right, today we're going to be talking about the future. So I'll spend about 3 or 4 minutes doing this, and that will give you an idea. When we look into the future, we see things differently. And a lot of the work that I can see Professor Tarun Khanna doing, and I've read a little bit of his book and a couple of his case studies, and I resonate with this a lot. Now, let me ask rhetorical questions to everybody. In this digital age, what do you think are the 2 or 3 most important things that are going to define our future? What do you think is going to define our future? What do you think is going to define your future? Is it fintech, because we're in a financial world? Or what else? Anybody else? Blockchain? Sorry? Health. Anybody else? Artificial intelligence. Sorry? Sustainability. All of that is correct. However, the fundamental driver of the future is not blockchain or fintech or AI or big data or anything like that. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, it is the theme of this book. It's trust, it's ethics, it's humanity, it's values, and it's empathy. You can have fintech, but if you don't have your ethics and compliance in place, it won't work. You can have biotechnology, but if you don't have your moral compass and values in place, it won't work. Our friends, the dinosaurs, were big and strong and huge and stuff, but they became extinct. Corporate Darwinism. And this is a study from Babson College which talks about that 75% of the companies will be banished into obscurity by the year 2025. 75% of the companies, boom, gone. And 50% of the companies that will replace those 75% of the companies have not been born today. You can create those companies. Entrepreneurship can create those companies. And the core work that Tarun and his group is doing, those are the companies that create the future. Trust, ethics, empathies, and values. That is the currency of the future. That is what you need to be focused on. Education will follow. The great Professor Tarun Khanna. He is the Jorge Paolo Lehman Professor at HBS. He's the director at Lakshmi Mittal South Asia Institute. He's an academic, he's a thought leader, he's an author, and he's an economic strategist. He's also an entrepreneur. And when I was reading part of his book, it is one of those wonderful things that are happening is that the greatest professors of today are also becoming great entrepreneurs. They're actually putting their money where their mouth is, which is amazing. Without further ado, please put your hands together for the amazing Professor Khanna, who's going to join us for a little fire chat with us. So.
Good evening. It's been so nice this evening to see so many old friends. Thank you all for welcoming my current students in the back there, and my former students who are interspersed here, and my colleagues, many of whom are from coming here from Boston, some of whom are in the region. It's lovely, really lovely to see. There's nothing better than seeing old friends and making new ones. I'm deeply, deeply grateful, deeply privileged to be here with all of you and to hear all the wonderful aspirations that I share for working with young people, particularly in the developing world. I moved as an 18-year-old from New Delhi and Bangalore to study in the U.S. When I was at Princeton, and pursued a degree that was very much like your last slide, actually. Okay. It was a degree I didn't intend to. I intended to be, a good developing country boy and be, straight down the middle engineer. But I found that I did a lot of music. Right. I did. It was the University of Einstein, so I had to do mathematics. And I studied Russian literature. I made some pottery. And then I graduated and had an absolute blast. There's stories of people that I admire. Not necessarily huge successes. Some of them are very successful. But they're people who really took on very, very big challenges. Challenges that it didn't seem like there was a quick and easy fix. And what I admired about them was the creativity, the ingenuity, the good spirit, the persistence, the perseverance they went about doing it. That's why they found a place in my book, because I salute that. I think it's just amazing. I mean, success often is a result of obviously talent and skill and insight, but also a good deal of luck. The essence of what they've always done is to realize, and I use this phrase a lot in my book, is to say that if you want to be an entrepreneur in the developing world, my primary interest, both as an academic scholar and as an entrepreneur, is to build businesses that cater to, I like to say, the 5 of the 7 billion people that we have relatively entirely forgotten. If you want to cater to these infrastructure compromised parts of the world, and I use the term infrastructure in a very encompassing and broad sense, the entrepreneur has no choice but to think differently, to have a mindset change in some ways, to not just create, but to first create the conditions to create. And that, in a sense, is the one-line summary of the main idea behind the book. So in those circumstances, what do you do as an entrepreneur? I think the academic community over the last 30 or 40 years, and I'm going to be a little bit unfair of my academic colleagues, have really resorted to 1 or 2 buckets. And they're caricatured by 2 of my colleagues who are associated with each of 2 very distinct buckets. Both of whom I think miss the point. One is former Harvard economist Jeffrey Sachs, who emphasizes in lovely and well-intentioned books, I forget the names, End of Poverty, things like that, talks a lot about the need to be much more generous, to give more aid, as being the solution to lifting up the bottom of the bottom. He is actively and vociferously debated by another New York City colleague of his, Bill Esterly, who says aid has been proven to be a waste of time. We've spent hundreds of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars, and the aid all vanishes. Rather, we have to empower people to do solve their own problems, which is nice sounding, but he doesn't say very much about what that means in practice and what to do about it. What I'm trying to do in this book is to say that if you were to give people the tools to think about how to build ventures, how do you get them to deal with the compromised infrastructure which surrounds them all the time? What are practical ways in which they can go about doing this? To what extent can they rely on technology? How do they, particularly in an atmosphere replete with mistrust, or limited trust, I think might be a better way to say it. Now, the idea of trust is ancient, actually. The idea of trust underpinning commerce is truly ancient. Speaking to my class at Harvard, they would relate to Adam Smith, the Scottish political economist, if you will, very readily. But if you actually look at the history, I'm a history buff also, that's the other thing I did at college, I read history. But one of the things that's central to Adam Smith not in The Wealth of Nations, which is the book that many people cite, without reading I might add, But in this other book, which they also cite without reading, he says that markets cannot exist without fairness, altruism, and trust. That's the central theme in this book. These are sort of the four things that I emphasize in this book. First is this mindset shift, which I think is the central idea, really. The others are corollaries. To create, not just to create, but to create the conditions to create. Technology is all very good, but it's neither necessary nor sufficient to effect change at scale. I'm actually living through a very nice experiment. I work very closely with the Prime Minister's office in India for the last many years, but including this current Prime Minister. And one of the most pleasurable tasks I've been given by the current administration in India is to create a framework to think about entrepreneurship across India. Right? And the reason behind that is a very simple, scary accounting detail, which is that we in India have 110, 120 million young people entering the workforce in the next 10 years. That's 10 million a year, net addition to the workforce. And if you look at job creation, incremental job creation, the conventional way of looking at macroeconomic statistics, we'd be hard-pressed to generate maybe 1 million new jobs a year. And that's the last principle here. Work with the state, no matter how dysfunctional or venal it might be. Right? So I know that it's easy for my colleagues in the upper middle and affluent classes in India to point fingers at the government and say it's corrupt, it's doing this, it's doing side deals, it's not doing its job. But at the end of the day, you've got to work with the state to effect change at scale. Right? So about 7 years ago, one of my students from HBS and I were sitting in Mumbai, and we saw this sort of scene. It's a guy making tea on the road. Right? Very common scene. You see it all the time. Chai wala. Right? You see writing in Hindi in the back. Here's another guy. This is in Jaipur, close to in Rajasthan, in the desert. And we said, we can reinvent this. We can make clean tea for the average person on the street, initially as a social enterprise, right? Saying, can you find some way where people who drink tea from this sort of guy, right, or this guy in the city, wouldn't they like a nicer cup of tea that's cleaner in a slightly more modern setting that has less waste, and so on and so forth. So we thought we could reinvent it. So we built this company. It's called Chai Point. It's in about 8-10 cities around India. And I'm going to use it to illustrate my main point, which is to create the conditions to create. Right? Because at every step, that's what we've had to do. So our whole idea is that we are going to control the ritual of drinking tea, chai, from the time that a person wakes up in the morning to the time that he or she goes to bed at night. So we've got stores, we've got deliveries, we've got chai robots. Here's the first store that we opened about in 2009. It's a very simple, dumpy store. It was sort of our lab. We opened the store and we just waited to see who would come. You can see that it took no time to open the store. It's just a red thing on the top in Bangalore and a few pots, and that's it. But the whole value proposition is that you want a consistent, simple cup of tea any time of the day, anywhere that you are in India, right? And if Starbucks is charging $3 or $2.50 or $2 for a cup of tea, you should be able to get it for 25 cents. Right? You should have it at a discount of at least 75%, if not more. Right? That's the proposition. So right now, we have about 150 stores in 5-6 cities, and we've got these robots that we built, and the robots are really cool. Along the way, we pivoted to saying that this is really a dumb way to do this. If we want to get hundreds of millions of cups, billions of cups of tea out there, it's going to take me a long time if I open a store at a time. Right? I'm up to 150, I can get up to 500, no problem, and I can sell the company, and it'll be great, and so on. But I'm not going to get to 1 billion, 2 billion cups of tea. I'm not going to be able to employ the kids that I employ in the stores who are all trained in-house and who otherwise have no jobs. So this is part of the employment generation, social enterprise part of it. So I said, let's make a robot. So we made a robot. The robot actually mimics, the robot actually goes and looks at what this guy does. Literally, how his hand moves. I'm not kidding. Went and took pictures of the guy, how much time he turns it like this, what he puts in, how much temperature, and this guy, how he pours it like this and like this. And the robot physically mimics all this, okay, in a little dispenser that looks like a space-age dispenser, but inside you've got all these moving parts kind of going like that. And what comes out is a cup of tea that I promise you is the most amazing cup of tea you'll have. So I call it chai on the cloud. Actually, you don't. I just made that up. But chai on the cloud, because you can control it on your phone. You can get it delivered anywhere, wherever there's a Wi-Fi signal. It's automatically billed, so the company's HR department can decide whether it's free to the employees or charged. You can add your tax, no tax. Now, the problem is that all the conditions that we needed to make this work didn't exist. Just like Shao had no trained people for tech happy cow milk, we had to create an entire system of schools to train people to be sort of the baristas inside our tea stores. So we had to create the conditions to create. We like to be a zero carbon footprint type of company, so we had to create a lot of environmental packaging that doesn't exist in India. So we had to create the conditions for that from zero. We had to develop the robot. There's no robotics industry in India. The only robotics industry that exists right now is for automating big warehouses. There's no consumer robotics industry. There's no health tech robotics industry. So we tried and we failed on that front to create the conditions to create. What I mean by that is we created version 1 of our robot, and then when it became more sophisticated, we found that our investors couldn't understand what we were talking about. They were more interested in doing open 200 more stores, open 300 more stores, because we understand that brick and mortar, cookie cutter in some ways. So we left India for that version. We moved that part of the company to Shenzhen in southern China, went and found the right people to work with. So the point that I'm trying to make is that when we couldn't create the condition to create, we had to get out. There was no choice, right? The principle that I find most useful is that you need to have this mindset shift, that it's all very well to say you need to be focused on your venture, but when you're in an infrastructure compromised environment where very few people trust each other because they're conditioned not to, it's difficult to get people to work together to create these conditions to create. And the name of the game here is to find a way to get through that puzzle. Let me stop with that. Thank you very much.
Our grandparents were all entrepreneurs. They were fishermen, they were bakers, they were all entrepreneurs. And then we sort of got lost and we started looking for jobs. Are we going full circle?
Well, we still have daily entrepreneurs. I mean, in economics and in development economics in particular, there's a distinction between forced and unforced entrepreneurship, voluntary and involuntary entrepreneurship. And the idea there is that a lot of what we are calling entrepreneurship isn't really entrepreneurship, it's just sort of subsistence. I can't find a job, so I open a small tea store like those guys in there. I think in this book, I'm sort of more concerned about how do you take change that makes life measurably better, but do it at scale. Because again, I'm sort of very conscious. I just crossed 50, and if I want to make enough change by the time I'm 70, that's not a whole lot of time left. So we can think in large bite sizes of tens of millions of people. That would be nice. I think that's what's different.
You speak about ambient trust.
Yes.
What does that actually mean?
So there's a political scientist, I forget where he is at now, Fukuyama, who wrote a book called Trust many years ago, 30 years ago. And in that he observed, accurately but not to my mind very helpfully, in that he observed that in some societies people trust each other, and other societies they just don't. And then the rest of the book was speculation on why that had happened, some confidence of history. So ambient trust refers to I guess the idea that, as I say in the beginning of my book, that I can leave my garage door open or my front door open in the city that I live in Newton, and nobody's going to walk in ever. Nobody's going to care. I couldn't do that in Mumbai.
One of the theses that I put up there was that trust could be the future currency. Mm-hmm. Can we actually make that into a currency? In other words, measure trust? You measure it in different ways. So, for example, in the world of fake news, mm-hmm. real news from a real editor, mm-hmm. we are at higher trust level. Mm-hmm. We can give that journalist a trust point. Similarly, in business, we had this in social, in microfinance and so on. So there were a lot of trust-based relationships.
Absolutely.
Can that be a currency, and can we start trading it, and can you put a Bitcoin in there and create a cryptocurrency around trust?
So I love it when people shout blockchain whenever anything is changing. By the way, to the kids, Kareem, actually, my colleague, knows a lot about blockchain. He's going to talk a lot about it tomorrow, or day after, in our course. Can I do an aside for a second? Please. I met the coolest guy a few months ago in one of these World Economic Forum meetings, and we're going to do a session on that with the kids tomorrow, using blockchain to save the Amazon, right? And the idea basically is to, and I'm working with him very closely to help him realize it. But the idea is that, look, the Amazon is getting deforested at a rapid rate. The Amazon is the lungs for the world. So if you do that, it's going to have devastating effect on climate change. And the reason it's getting deforested is that the people who live in the Amazon don't see any value to the diversity around it. They'd rather just cut the trees and grow some crops and so on. So how can we get them to get value from the biodiversity? Now, the rest of the world recognizes the value of biodiversity. That's why you've all big pharma and consumer products and Colgate and what have you rushing in there, grabbing stuff and not compensating the locals for the biodiversity. So this wacky guy's idea is, if I can digitize the genome of every living entity in the Amazon, okay? So far, we think that we have digitized 0.2% of the genomes of what's called eukaryotes, which are species that have defined nuclei, right? And that's only a subset of all living things, 0.2%. So if we can get to close to 100%, then anybody who takes anything will have a way to write a smart contract, the way you do with blockchains, so that there would be a prayer of getting, of the Amazonians trusting that somebody would compensate them for their natural bounty, and then they would preserve it, and then we wouldn't have global warming. It's a massively mad idea. That's why I love it. And so we're working on it. But we've got the World Economic Forum, we've got all the world banks lined up, got a bunch of banks. This is his idea, it's not my idea. I'm just kind of one of the people pushing him. But on trust, I mean, your issue of measuring trust, I don't know about measuring trust and trust itself as a currency, but the idea that trust has value that is measurable, that's well established. There are plenty of instances when both well established, both in an anecdotal sense. We know that trustworthy businesses in this part of the world and in my countries, any developing country, will automatically get paid a premium for their product because people will know that they're there for the long haul, they're reliable, they won't cheat, etc. They won't cut corners. But that's not trust as a currency. That's measuring the effects of trust. And it's also been shown in very many econometric statistical studies. The currency part, I don't know. My
it's
brain's
worth thinking
not flexible
about.
enough. Yeah.
It's worth thinking about, because I think if we can start creating news, for example, and each news item, you buy that one news item, because today we have search,
Sure.
and search is a boring word search.
Yep.
And now we can go in terms of quality and trust, and how much do I trust this particular journalist.
Right.
So there is a value to that particular piece of information. So therefore we are paying for trust in some ways. I beg your pardon? Trust is not true. Now we're getting very philosophical.
Yes. He's saying that you're equating trust with truth, and that's not necessary. Right. So I agree with that. No, I agree with that.
How do you, so the final question, and I'll open it up a couple of points, and then we'll wrap up, because I think we are challenged for time. These young people, how do you teach them trust? How do you teach them to trust? How do you trust them? How do they evaluate trust?
So today we had a,
it's just a platitude.
No, I agree with you. I think it's very difficult. Very difficult. Part of my wanting to write this book was to get some real stories out there where you can see the concrete sort of bottom line implications of somebody fostering trust in a small attempt to build a momentum towards it. I was going to say that today we had, those who have been in my classes will know that I spent a lot of time working with this heart surgeon in India who has pioneered the lowest cost heart surgery over the last 10, 15 years. A guy named Devi Shetty in Bangalore, really rock star, scientist, entrepreneur, heart surgeon, philanthropist. We got to working together partly because both of us are do-goody types. Right? We want to do good. And I don't mind leaving a buck on the table as long as I can have a small cut. I don't mind leaving a buck on the table for the rest of society. And Devi's like that too. So a lot of the kids were struggling with it today and saying, oh, but why does the doctor agree to do that? You know, why not raise the price? Why not charge more? And these are good questions. These are legitimate questions. In a sense, they were struggling with why is somebody kind of, you know, there's an English movie called Pay It Forward, where the idea is that you give back, and sooner or later, and we all have proverbs in our own countries that sound roughly similar. You give back, and somehow the world gives it back to you eventually, right? And there was a movie along that, yes. And in a way, I actually deeply believe it. I find that the more I help people around it, the more they come back and they do stuff with me. I mean, Crossroads is an example of that, right? It's not really my brainchild. I mean, it's free writing on Goulam and the HBS Clubs and all the folks in Dubai. But the academic idea came from Karim Lakhani and myself, saying that wouldn't it be great to just trigger all this? And I'm sure it would be great for us eventually also. I have no idea how it'll be great for us.
Which was the butterfly effect we were talking about.
Yeah, how can it not be? How can it not? So I don't know whether there's a suspension of disbelief or something for a little while, or the luxury of being able to wing it and see what happens. I'm not sure.
Are there any absolutely burning questions? Because I'm getting the look now, the really hard look. Thank you very much indeed, Tarun.
So
Put a big hand for Tarun.
Thank you very much.
And everybody gets the book. I've just started reading it. I'm already enjoying it and learning a huge amount. And I hope all of us can do. It's been a real honor and privilege. Thank you very much, sir.